دلوقتي خلونا نرحب مرة تانية بأحد أشهر المتخصصين في مجال النانو إلكترونكس ورئيس مركز النانو إلكترونكس بالجامعة الأمريكية ومدينة أسبوع العلوم والتكنولوجيا والآي تريبل إي فيلو دكتور يحيى اسماعيل.
اهلا بيكم تاني. هنتكلم بقى عن العلم بقى المره دي، مش عن العلم هو ايه، عن العلم يعني هو ايه. اوكي؟ فمعانا النهارده we have with us Dr. David Stork. He graduated in physics from MIT and University of Maryland, very prestigious university. He is currently a Rambus fellow at Rambus Labs in the Silicon Valley, where he sits. Rambus is a company that's multi-billion dollars company, high-tech company in the Silicon Valley, works on memory, cryptography, تشفير, imaging and lighting اللي هو هيتكلم عليه النهارده. الشركة دي فيها 650 شخص فقط وبتعمل multi-billion dollar زيها. Okay? He published 8 books, 200 papers, 200 papers, and he holds 47 US patents. 47 براءة اختراع. هو fellow دي رانك عالية يعني. Optical Society of America, International Association for Battery Recognition, International Academy Research and Industry Association, Society for Photographic Instrumentation and Engineering. عمل دوكيومنتري موفي فور امريكان بابليك، يعني مهتم انه يعمل الدوكيومنتري لشعبانة العلوم، يعني اشتغل في شعبانة العلوم والكمبيوتر ساينس. اوكي؟ هو كمان كان عنده 8 فاكولتي بوزيشنز، يعني درس في 8 ديبارتمنتس مختلفين، 8 different departments: physics, mathematics, electrical engineering, computer science, statistics, neuroscience, psychology, arts and art history, and he's a musician. He plays music as well. ومن some of the best universities, Stanford, Boston, and he's one of the leaders of industry in the Silicon Valley, who could be classified as such in one of these companies. So please welcome David, who's kindly here.
Well, thank you so much, and thank you all for coming here. Today, I'd like to talk about making the world's smallest video camera. And it's using optics for computation and computation for optics. So, how small can we make a camera? Here is the smallest commercial camera. It's called the Megas endoscope camera. It's about 1 millimeter across. And the reason it's this size is because you need a lens inside the video camera. So there's a lens here, and then a sensor at the back, and then the signals come out the wire there. If you want to make a camera smaller, it's very difficult because the lenses, it's hard to make a lens smaller than that and produce a good quality image. So we had a different idea. We were going to use a new technique that puts a lot of the burden, fix it, there we go. The idea is to take some of the burden of focusing and do it in software, do it in computation, not in optics, but in computation. And this lets us make a new camera that's so small. How small? Here on the same size. Here is the size of our camera. You can fit 7 of them inside the little O of a pen. That's how small our camera is. Here's another way of looking at it. Here's a human hair, a cross-section of a human hair, and here's the optics part of our camera. It doesn't look like a lens at all. Instead, it's called a diffraction grating. It doesn't bend light, instead it diffracts light. It relies on the wave nature of light, as I'll explain in a moment. Here is a scanning electron micrograph, a microscope view of the surface of our camera. Made out of plastic in order to make it inexpensive and to do the right optics. Or, here's a human hair, and here's the optics part of our camera. Very, very, very small. Or we need some computation for our camera, so we make it on a computer chip. And so here is the entire camera, and this is the tip of a ballpoint pen. So next time you look at the tip of your ballpoint pen, imagine the entire camera is this size. There's no lens. This isn't part of the camera. This is the camera. Now, to understand how we built it, you have to think about the grand sweep of the development of optics. All the trends that have gone on in optics. There have been really 4 revolutions in optics. The first revolution was when we could focus light, make a lens that would take light and bring it to focus on a piece of paper. And that, of course, led to microscopes and telescopes and sextants and many optical devices that were based on bending light to make it focus. The next revolution was photography, being able to use chemistry to fix the image, use silver halide to make a photograph from the image that was projected onto it. Now, when I was your age, this is what cameras were all about, film. This was, when I was your age, it was before a digital camera had ever been built. But the next revolution was the digital revolution. It really comes from the development of optics, which kept getting better and better and better. But there was also a new thread, a new science that came involved, and that was the digital revolution. Having signal theory and information theory, the notion of bits, when you hear about gigabytes, that's not measuring something that weighs something, it's information. So the information revolution and computer science and the hardware that goes along with computing, those came together in 1975 when Steve Sasson built the first digital camera. It was about this big, had big lenses and charged couple devices, PCBs, and so forth. But now, almost everything is digital. Hardly anyone takes a picture using film anymore. I suspect none of you have ever taken a picture using film. So this is the revolution that's now in the marketplace and that everyone has in their pockets, a digital camera. But the new revolution, the revolution we're in right now, is called the computational imaging revolution. And that's where the optics and the computer science are deeply integrated, deeply intermixed. So it's not separate optics and separate processing, instead they're together. And so instead of capturing an image the way a lens does, in these new devices, we compute an image. We don't capture an image, we collect data and we compute an image. So let me tell you why corporations are very interested in this. Well, I've never seen this figure before, so I made it myself. This is a graph of the physical size of different cameras. It's a logarithmic scale. It goes over 20 orders of magnitude. From the very smallest single pixel camera, just one little pixel, all the way to the end of the Grand Canary telescope. It's a humongous telescope in the Grand Canary Islands off of Spain, the largest. And this axis tells us the resolution of a picture in each one of those different cameras. And it's also a logarithmic scale, so there are gigapixels here. One picture can have several billion pixels. Your camera might have, I don't know, 6 megabytes, 10 megabytes. The Grand Canary telescope has several billion pixels. You get the finest detail. This is a smaller telescope, is the Hubble Space Telescope, the one that's in orbit around the Earth. It has a smaller film picture size. And down here to a 1 meter telescope. Here is the iPhone camera, the one I have in my pocket. This one right there. That's this size. But it has a smaller resolution, several megapixels. And then down to the Megas camera I showed you a moment ago. But what you see is there are no cameras in this range. that's 9 orders of magnitude of size, where you cannot buy a camera. If you wanted a camera this small, what would you do? You'd have to use the camera that we invented. Now, another aspect of this is the sales. How many cameras are actually sold? Well, if you look at the Grand Canary telescope, there's only one. It was built 37 years ago, so you sell 1/37th of them per year. That's what the blue curve will show. How many of these are sold every year? Here's the Hubble Space Telescope. It's 25 years old. You sell 1/25th of them per year. And when you get to the iPhone cameras, you sell almost 1 billion cameras per year. That's what the blue curve shows. And then it just drops off. No cameras are sold here. You can't buy them. Now, we thought that the reason there's nothing being sold here isn't because people don't want it. It's just that there were no cameras small enough. So you have to think this blue curve as really being something like this, and that our job is to make a camera so small that people will want it. Now, it won't have high resolution. It won't be a camera that you take a picture and then post to Facebook. It'll have low resolution, but there are many applications for small, simple cameras. So for instance, in the Internet of Things, you might have a little device like your toaster or coffee machine. You don't need a full camera on that. All you need is a little camera that can tell when you come up to it, and then it'll turn on automatically. So it's not going to take a high-quality picture, but it's good enough to say someone's close by. Or another way to think about it is in the animal world. Some animals have very high-resolution vision systems, like humans, like hawks, like birds of prey, and so forth. And those are way up here, very high resolution. But way down here are the cats, and then the insects, and so forth. And there are a lot more insects than there are people or other animals. So we think there's a great need for cameras way down here. Here's another reason that this kind of computational imaging system will work. It's that the price of optics is dropping off at about 5% per year. If you take the same lens and buy it the next year and the next year, it drops a little bit, 5% per year. However, computers are dropping very, very fast. It's called Moore's Law, that we get double the compute power every 18 months or so. So if we can make our camera use a lot of computation, then the cost will keep dropping very, very quickly. And that's one reason why we've done this. Now to some of the physics. To make a camera, you have to bend light somehow. And for many years, for centuries, people bent light by using reflection. They had curved mirrors like the back of a telescope. Or lenses, refraction of light, you get in a camera. And this is how imaging was done for centuries. Well, just in 2011, my colleague and group used a different optical principle to do imaging. They made the planar Fourier capture array. And the idea is that you don't bend light using a lens or with a curved mirror, but instead use what's called a diffraction grating. Now, for those of you in physics, you're familiar with a diffraction grating. It's basically a little piece of plastic with ridges on it. And when the light strikes it, the wave nature of light means the light will go in one direction or another direction, but not yet other directions. So it breaks up the light into different wavelengths, and the wavelengths go in different directions. And here is our grating, our diffraction grating. It's in a particular spiral shape. And here is what's called the point spread function. If you take a star and make the light comes parallel and straight to the diffraction grating, It passes through, and it doesn't come to a small spot like it would with a lens. Instead, it's spread out in this funny spiral. No one had ever used a spiral like this in optics before. It looks crazy. Why would you ever do this? Well, we figured out that it would be useful. And so, in a traditional lens, light comes from far away and will pass through the lens and will all be brought to a focus on the film or on the digital sensor. And we can plot that like a curve like this, that as a function of the angle the light comes in, all the light, at this angle, all the light comes to one point. No light comes to this point, no light comes to this point. And that's very good for making an image, because each point on the scene in this room will go to a different point on the sensor, and then you just have your image right there on the sensor. But if you use a diffraction grating, then here's a diffraction grating and here's a pixel in the camera. If light comes this direction, we'll go through the grating and strike the pixel. But if it comes from this direction, it won't. The wave nature of light means that light coming from certain directions will never get through. And from this direction it will, this direction won't, won't. So instead of getting just a narrow function here, instead we get a function that looks like this. If light comes from this direction, we get a signal, no signal. Signal, no signal. Signal, no signal. And just it's kind of complicated, but that's how it works. And here's how it was built. This is a cross-section of a computer chip, a very special computer chip, where the cleverness was to use the wires. So these are the wires in the computer chip. This is very small, 10 microns, very teeny. And here are the wires, they're going into the board. This. And here's the light coming through. And this graph, this figure shows the intensity of the light. Some places it's bright, some places it's dark. And then you have another set of wires down here, and depending upon which direction the light comes through, either it will strike a pixel in the camera, or it won't. Will or won't. And that's how we got that curve before. So this is a very clever idea. To use the wires in a computer chip, not to carry electricity. There's no electricity being involved here. Instead, to use it as an optical device, as a diffraction grating. And so here's one way to think about it. Imagine you're the pixel, or imagine you're standing by a house and there's a picket fence, just a board, like this. And then imagine there's another fence further away, like that, further away. Well, in some directions you can see between the slats, like this. So light coming from that direction will come to your eye. Light coming from over here won't, because they are out of phase. They block the light completely. So light will come from here, no light here, no light here. And that's how we got that curve that I showed you before. So that's how this diffraction grating works. It has a new kind of response function as a function of angle. And that's what happened in the computer chip. Those two sets of wires were like the picket fences that you look between. Light will come from some direction, but not from others. Some direction, not from others. So here's a little movie. Here's light coming in at different angles, going through one of the sets of wires, and then the other. And you can see sometimes it's blocked, some angles it's blocked, other times it's not. And so you get a curve that looks like this. So each individual pixel has a response that depends upon the angle that the light comes in. Yes, no, yes, yes, no, yes. So it's a new principle. It's a new method for making an image. So the idea was to make, you can't see it on this projector, but these are just those kinds of gratings. The wires are at different angles and different separations. So here's the computer chip, and if you look really closely, there's one of those wire gratings at a certain orientation right here, and a different one over here is for this. So they're every different orientation, every angle, and different separation, like this. And so when you point it, and there's no lens at all here, it's just a computer chip. So when light comes, some of the pixels behind the wires will get a large signal, others will get a small signal. And that information is enough to let you compute what the scene looked like. And so here is, if you put this input, you get different numbers inside each one of the pixels, and using a technique called Fourier synthesis, those of you who study mathematics or physics are familiar with Fourier analysis. You use the Fourier components to reconstruct the picture. And so here is the response of each one of those pixels. So one of the pixels has this response. That pixel has a gradient in front of it like this. So if light comes from here, it will respond no, yes, no, yes, no, yes, no. Others, if it's an orientation, go like this. So it's yes, no, yes, no, yes, no, and so forth. All the possible orientations. And that contains the information from the scene. The signals don't look like an image, but they contain the information about the image. And so there were some technical problems with that system. I won't go into the details. We made a new kind of grading. First of all, that didn't use wires. Wires blocked light. So we didn't get enough light coming to the sensors. We wanted to save light. So instead, we used what's called a phase grading. So instead of a wire to block light, we just changed the thickness a little bit. So it changes the wave nature of light. It changes the wave that's coming through the grating onto the sensors down below. So this is like a cross-section, a cut through our camera. Again, this is 10 microns. 1/100th the thickness of a coin. So it's very, very small. And the trick was to make sure that you had what we call curtains, that no matter how thick you made this gradient, you would still get the same signal down at the end. It's kind of mathematically tricky, but that was the core idea. I won't go through all the details. So here's a comparison of the response in the planar Fourier capture array with all those little gratings as a function of the light coming in at different angles. So at one wavelength, we get the response goes up, down, up, down, up, down, as we've already seen. If you use a different wavelength, it goes down, up, down, up, down, up. And so the image you get will depend upon what color the light is coming in. We don't want that. We want the image to be the same, whether it's a red object, or a green object, or a blue object. And so with our gratings, we get this oscillatory motion here, this kind of graph, but it does not change very much with respect to the wavelength, the color of light. That's what we want. So, I'll skip these details. Now, everything I told you about those gratings was just doing a grating in a line, a one-dimensional grating. But images have information at every possible orientation. So we had to figure out a way how to take this 1D, one-dimensional grating, and make it take information from every possible orientation. And there are a couple ways you can try that. One is to make what we call a pinwheel. You're familiar with the child's toy that spins around, where each pebble across here has that special mathematical property that preserves the wavelength of insensitivity. But there were problems with this. I won't go into detail. It didn't respond equally well to every possible orientation. Likewise, we tried this bullseye idea, and that didn't work very well. The one that did work is a special spiral. So along every one of these spiral curves, if you cut across it, you get that special mathematical property of the gradient. And so that's why all our little cameras this special optical device, it's a new kind of optical device. It's not a lens, it's not a curved mirror, it's a special diffraction ring that has all those special mathematical properties that mean we're going to save all the information. So here's sort of an overview of how it works. Here's our phase rating, and light comes from the outside world through the phase rating, and it doesn't come to a point like in a camera. Instead, it's spread out in this spiral that I showed you before. And now, if you put in lots of points of source, like in the picture of the Mona Lisa, each one of these sends light through the grating onto the sensor, onto the photodetector. And the image you get is like an image you've never seen. Here's what it is. That. This is the picture that gets captured by our camera. It looks terrible. You don't know what it is. It's a complete, we call it a blob. But it's not an image meant for humans to see. It's an image for computers to see. This contains all the, to a computer, this looks beautiful. A computer looks at this and says, perfect. To human, it doesn't. So a computer can take this blobby information and compute an image for us to see. And so here it is, this. Now it's not high resolution, but don't forget, this camera is as small as your hair, as the end of your hair. And you can still get an image that looks like this. But it takes a lot of computation. More computer power is needed. But again, computer power is very inexpensive. It's getting cheaper, faster and faster and faster. So we don't care how much computing it takes, because computing is almost free. Now, for this audience, I won't go through the mathematics of how we compute the image, but it involves Fourier theorems and inverse matrices and very interesting mathematics. But maybe for this audience, I won't go through all the details of it. It involves, it's called a pseudo-inverse of the matrix, so I won't go through that. And so here's some examples of what our camera can take. Again, remember how small it is. So these are the inputs. Here's the signal that is on the sensor. A mess. It's a blob. None of you can tell what those images are, but a computer can. A computer can take all this information and then compute the image and get back to it. It's not exactly perfect. It's a little bit blurrier, but it's clearly you can tell what it is. Likewise, this image, and likewise this, you can read the letters. So a computer looks at this and produces this. Likewise, John Lennon, this article. So I think this is really a very profound idea that we're making cameras to make images not for humans to look at, but for computers to look at. And this frees us up. We can have whole new kinds of computers, imagers, based on this, and they can be very, very small and inexpensive. Now, let's compare these devices to lens imagers, like a standard camera. A standard camera has what's called depth of field. So this is a standard lens, like in your iPhone camera. And here's the sensor plane, part that senses the light. If an object is a certain distance away, the light will be brought to a nice sharp focus. But if the object is farther away, then the light will not come to a focus, it will be spread out, it will be blurry. Likewise, if there's a point here, too close, that light spreads out. And so the kinds of images you get are like this. Nice and sharp at one distance, but it's very blurry for objects farther away, and very blurry for objects close by. That's called the depth of field, the range of distances where the image appears sharp. And you've probably seen many pictures like this, where close objects are blurry, far objects are blurry, in the middle they're nice and sharp. Well, the way to make the ball sharp is to make the lens very, very small. So here's an object far away from the lens, and it sends light, and the wavefront of light is like this here. And if you have a close-by object, light goes on something like this, and at the edges, you can see that there's a difference. But if you make the camera very small, you just let light into the little part in the middle, they're almost the same. And therefore, objects close will be sharp in focus, and objects far away will be sharp in focus. Well, that's what works with our little camera. Because it is so small, objects about 1 millimeter away are far enough away that they will be in focus, the equal image. Likewise, something very, very far away. So our camera, has a very large depth of field. Objects closer in focus, objects far away in focus. That's better in some ways than a standard camera. So again, here's sort of the summary of where we've come so far. The core idea is that we use diffraction for the optics, not refraction like the lens, not reflection like a curved mirror. Instead, diffraction, these special gratings that have very interesting mathematical properties. And so, when something in the scene sends light through that grating, we get this blobby, messy, unintelligible image. But to a computer, it looks great. The computer can then compute what the image looks like for us to look at. So we built many of these devices. Here's one of our earliest. We mounted on a board, a computer board, and it's facing a television screen so that we can put in whatever input patterns we want, control it by our computer. The signals come out and go to our personal computer where we do the mathematics to recompute the image. And for our very first one, which we did a few years ago, we made our gratings on one fairly large piece of plastic. 5 millimeters by 4 millimeters, about this big. But it had many different gratings. Here's one grating, here's another, many different gratings. And all the data I've shown you came from just this little grating here. This is a scanning electron micrograph, a teeny image of the surface of our grating. But we used other gratings for different types of applications. But let me just show you one that was sort of special. Here's a grating where all the lines were vertical. Why would we ever do that? Well, we wanted a grating that was just useful for reading barcodes. In a store you buy a book, and it has a vertical barcode on the back. We don't care the information up and down, we only care about the information left and right. So we made a special grating that only cared about the information left and right. So this would not be useful for taking a picture, like of the Mona Lisa or of your face, but it would be really good at taking the information for a barcode. And different gratings were all optimized for different types of problems, whether we wanted a large field of view, or a small field of view, and things like this. So, in a normal camera, you design one lens and one lens system, and then you use your camera for many different things, like taking a picture of your face, like a selfie, or taking a picture of a barcode, or telling whether there's motion. In ours, we can design the optics that is appropriate for a particular task. So if you want something that just reads barcodes, use this grating. If you want something that's just going to take pictures of faces, use this grating, and so forth. So part of the design of the optics, now you have to ask yourself, what will it be used for? Because we're going to be using it for things not just taking pictures. It's like reading a barcode, and I'll show you that in a few slides. So here are those micrographs of the gratings. I hope you can see them here, but this is a scanning electron micrograph, a microscope view of the surface of the gratings. You see these beautiful patterns here, like some of the beautiful Islamic patterns on the sides of mosques and inside mosques. And here's a cross-section to show how sharp we can do the etching, how we can make the gratings have exactly the shape we need. And so here are the results. So if we use this grating, then when light comes through, it leads to this pattern on the sensor, on the pixel. So this is 256 pixels by 256. And so if you have a single point, like this laser pointer, that will lead to a signal that looks like this. Not a small spot, but something all spread out. Now, what are some other reasons we would like this? Well, if you want to know exactly where a spot is, where this, if you have a camera that wants to know exactly where this point is, this is extremely good. Why? Because to find the location of the center of this pattern is very easy. You have many, many pixels to find the center of mass, where the exact center is. We can find the center so accurately because there's so much information. We can find it to 1/50th the size of an individual pixel. So you have a single pixel that in a standard camera will either be bright or dark. We can tell with 50 by 50 array inside that exactly where the center is. So it's very, very good at telling where a spot is, and that's useful for tracking the pattern. And it also has a fairly wide angle of view, so we can get information from one side and another side. And we can tell whether there's been any change, any motion, because if even the smallest change in the ceiling in the world, someone moves their head, it will lead to signals changing all throughout. So here's a single spot that moves over just a little bit, and many, many pixels have changed their value. So the computer can take all this information and tell whether something has moved very accurately. Oh, this is not very exciting to do that. This is a little technical. So anyway, here are some of the reasons we like this. First of all, these cameras are very small. They're very thin. They're very low mass, 30 micrograms for the grading part alone. It only costs about 15 cents, US cents, to make the grading that you then put on the photodetector array. So these are fairly inexpensive. And the part that I'm researching now, the one I'm really working on hard, is making these cameras application specific. If the sole goal is to tell whether there's something moving in the field of view, what's the best grading? I don't know. I'm working on it. What if we want to tell, read a barcode? We have some ideas. What is the very best grading if you want to read a barcode? I don't know. Or if we want to tell occupancy in a room. Suppose there are many applications when you want to just tell whether there are people in a room to turn on the lights or turn off the lights, turn on the air conditioning, turn off the air conditioning. So you don't need a high quality picture. You don't have to tell who they are. You just have to know that there are 4 people in the room. What's the best grading for that? I don't know. So, one of the other benefits of this very small camera is that it can use pixels. Pixels are, of course, the light-sensitive part of the sensor. And if you've watched the cost of cameras, someone buys a 10 megapixel camera, someone buys a 12 megapixel, a 15 megapixel, 20 megapixel, and higher. Turns out, that's a mistake. That when you make pixels so small, you no longer get new information. Because in a standard camera, there's something called the diffraction. It says that you're not getting any more information. You can't get infinitely teeny detail. And so having a sensor that small, a pixel that small, doesn't give you any more information. So for a normal camera, that size is about 2 microns. We call that the camera resolution barrier. And if you have a pixels smaller than that, you're not getting any new information. But with our teeny camera, you are. Our Pico camera, we call it, that is the smart sensor, has a resolution barrier at about 0.5 microns, meaning you can make those pixels smaller and smaller, and we will get more information. So we're giving a reason to the sensor manufacturers, please make pixels smaller and smaller and smaller, because we can use them. But what about non-imaging sensing? I've mentioned it a few times, things like barcode reading or face recognition. Now, face recognition, for instance, who is it that's come to the door? Think about it. Normally everybody says you have to have a good quality image to be able to tell who the person is. But what if there were a way to tell who it was without making a picture? Without making a traditional picture that we can understand? Well, we've done that. We've made a camera that can tell whether there's a face present, even though it never shows a face. I'll show you that. Well, one of the applications we've looked at is QR code readings. You're all familiar with these QR codes. When you put that through our sensor with our special grading, here's the image you get. It's a blob. It's a mess. But if you do the reconstruction, if you make the new image back, you get something like this. Not very high quality, but it's high enough. Because if we know that it's a barcode, the computer can process this and say each pixel here, each point, is either white or black. And so it automatically fixes it to be either white or black, and it can also rotate it. And then you get this output image. And now the computer can read this barcode. And so we have a barcode reader that's as small as the cross-section of a human hair. You can put that anywhere. You put it on your pen, you put it on your glasses, you can put it anywhere you want. It's so small. But notice that the image isn't perfect. In the input, we have this block 1, 2, 3. But over here, we only have 1, 2, so we're missing one. Turns out, these barcodes are constructed so that you don't have to get every single pixel right. That there's enough information here for it's called error correction. That if there's an error, you can nevertheless read that it was perfect. So thank goodness for this error correction, because we didn't get a perfect image, but it's good enough for our teeny little camera to read a barcode. Another thing we're working on is making sensors have very low power. There are many times when you want to have a camera that's just sitting on the wall for a day, a month, a year, always trying to take a picture. But that will use up the battery. The battery will go dead very quickly. We want one that uses very little power, very little electrical power, until it detects motion. When there's motion, then it says, now take a picture. So, one of the problems we're working on right now is what kind of optics, what kind of diffraction gratings can lower the overall power? Because, think about it, the optics is doing computation. It's processing the light. And if we can control it properly, we can put a lot of the burden on the optics, and that costs no electrical power. It doesn't wear the battery out at all. It happens very quickly, and it takes light to go through that very small device. And in parallel, it's going through all of them at the same time. And it doesn't waste the battery at all. So our research now is design the optics so that we don't use the battery very much. And so one of the devices we built, we actually built a computer chip for this, is for exactly that task. That the little camera just sits there and it takes one picture every second. Click, click, click. But it's really just looking if there's any change in the field of view. Because if it's already taken a picture and there's no change, don't take another picture. Wait till something happens. Wait till something moves. And the trick was to look in this blob domain, and at the blobby image, because if we just put the 16 pixels in there, then if there was motion anywhere in the field of view, one of these would change. If you use the normal camera and wanted to know if there was any change here, you'd have to look at this pixel, you'd have to look at this pixel, just at each one. Not so with ours, because the information gets spread out over the sensor. If you're watching this, if there's a change here, or here, or here, or here, you'll detect it. So we only have to look at 60 little pixels to tell whether there's a change. And when there is a change, well, then we collect all the data and compute the image. So this lowers the electrical power by a factor of about 1,000, because we're 1/1,000th the number of pixels that we're sensing all the time. And so we have devices that can sit and work on a battery for about 5 years. They're just sitting there, and if this room were empty for 5 years, and then someone opened the door and walked through, the camera would take a picture of it. And you have to use their clever optics in order for that to work. Oh, this is sort of technical optics, but we've been looking at different kinds of gratings that have different kinds of properties. Changing colors, or making things sensitive to color or not to color. We've come up with a new kind of diffraction grating we call it panchromatic Fresnel zone plate. We wanted to build a sensor that could just tell where a line was in the field of view. Now, there are many applications for this in watching machinery. If an object moves just a little bit left or right, we want to be able to detect it. Well, using this grating, we can do it very, very low power and very, very accurately. If you try to do it with the lens, it won't work as well. So this is very good for telling where a line is, not as good for taking your picture. So it's a bar locator, a line locator. It takes a visual bar and can tell exactly where it is. Oh, let's do that. We also wanted to make our device that could tell whether there was a face present. So one way would be to have the camera collect the blob information and then compute a face, and then use computer vision, computer algorithms to tell whether there's a face there or not. We thought, that's too much power. All this electrical power being used to compute face. Can we do it in the blob domain? In the blurry domain? And the answer turned out to be yes. We train our system to provide examples of faces and then images that are not face. And there's enough difference between the structure of the signals that the computer can say, this says there's a face present. Doesn't know who it is. Can't tell whether it's a male or female, old or young, it just says face. And if we get a signal like this, or other ones, it says it's not a face. And we used a technique called the K-nearest-neighbor algorithm. Computer scientists here are familiar with this. And here are results that, depending upon the number of pixels you sense, you can either tell whether something's a face or not face. With lots of pixels, you get the good discrimination, we call it, being able to tell that face is different from non-faces. If you only have a few pixels, you can't do it as well, so we use them all. So think about that. This is something the size of the cross-section of a hair, which you could put anywhere, on this chair, on a bottle, on your iPhone, on your watch. Imagine it on your watch, that if the power is off or very low all the time. When I go like this, that key little device says, a face is looking at me, turn it on. And you can save the power that way. So the real research task that we're facing now is, what is the best optics for a target application, for a job we want the system to do? If we wanted to just recognize faces, what's the very best grading? We don't know. Or barcode reading. We don't know which is the best. We have some ideas, but we don't have it. Or motion estimation. If we want to just tell whether something's moving, if you have a drone or a UAV, and you just want to know how fast it's moving by looking at the ground, you don't need a good picture, you just need something to tell the speed of motion. What's the best grading? I don't know. You can use these with lenses. I'm not sure I have time to go through all the details, but you can use these gratings along with optics to improve optics somewhat, but I won't go through all that details. I will spend a little time on how you can use these gratings to detect depth, how far away an object is. So when light comes through one of these gratings, it leads to a different point spread function, so long as you have a lens and grating. And so the computer can look at these signals and figure out how far away the object must be. And so here is some of our simulated research on it, that if you have something close, like an ice cream cone, something far away, like the Leaning Tower of Pisa, you have the point spread function, the blurriness of the image might be something like this. And if you use standard camera methods, you try to de-blur the image and you get something that looks like this, a sharper image. But if you use the grating, you get something that looks very crazy, these spiral point spread functions. But notice how different they are. This, for something close, and something far away. They differ very much. These are almost the same. These differ greatly. And so the computer can process those and lead to a sharper image that's going to be sharper here and here. Here's a comparison. It's really hard for you to see. Trust me, this is a better image. But because the computer had to do the processing, it can tell how far away the object was. So here's the image. You can see there's a person standing on the Leaning Tower of Pisa. Barely tell he's here. But using our system, you can see him that he's standing much better. But the computer now can tell how far away things are. And so we can tell that the ice cream cone is close and the Leaning Tower of Pisa is far away. Oh, and this is for just the physicists in the audience. If there's anyone here, this is kind of technical, but you earned it. You got here out of the 12,000. You're the ones who made it, so you deserve some real physics. Lenses have what are called aberrations. They don't lead to a perfect image. There are things called spherical aberration, chromatic aberration, chroma, and a single lens won't give you a perfect image. That's why when you buy an expensive video camera, you have many lenses inside, 6 or 7 or 8 or 9. I think my camera has, 7 little lenses inside to try to correct for that. Well, if you use a grating, you can detect what the aberration is, what the deformity is, what the mistake is, and the computer can fix it. And I won't go through all that, but that's what it does. It takes a lot of computation, but who cares? Computation is very inexpensive. So in summary, what I'd like you to remember, if there's only one image that you should remember from my entire talk, I hope you remember it all, but if you only remember one image, remember the blurry blob, the one that you couldn't make any sense of, because more and more images are going to be like that, and that the computer will process that you will later look at. So even in this era where everyone says, oh, there are images everywhere, really there aren't. Instead, we have digital files that we're looking at on a display. That's different from the kind of image that you would get with a standard camera with a lens that would project something onto a wall that you would look at on a ground glass screen before you put in the film. So even though we're looking at a lot of display screens, we're not looking at very many images. We call them images, but the physicists know that they really aren't images the way they are made with lenses. And because of that, we can make our images proper for a computer, not for us. Thank you very much. Can we take questions? Are there any questions? I told you not to have any questions. I have a question. What is the relation of the idea of camera, of al-Hassan, and the idea for modern time? Excellent question. As you should know, Al-Hasan, or Ibn al-Haytham, wrote 26 books on optics. He's one of the greatest Arabic scientists who ever lived, a long time ago. He understood some of the ideas of modern camera, but not some others. The notion of the inverted image was a tricky one that was really understood a little bit further on. But he understood a great deal about reflection, refraction of light passing through. He knew nothing about diffraction. He would not understand this stuff.
Any other questions? Dr. David? Okay, Dick. Jose first.
Or you can speak to me. In English, please.
Thank you, Dr. David. Thank you for this very interesting presentation. I have a question about the pixel response. Is it pixel response? The pixel response. Yeah. Is it unique? Is it one-to-one map to the image being captured? Meaning that if you have, for example, like 16 pixels in your image, the pixel size is larger than the usual pixel we have on digital screen, for example. So the information in it, is it unique? Is it one-to-one mapped to the actual value of?
Excellent question. Actually, this is a technical question, but an extremely good one. In a camera, normal camera with a lens, for each point, the light comes and is focused to a single point. And so, at a different point will go to a different point, and so you get the image there. And to understand what the scene is, you just look at it clearly. But for ours, the information is distributed, spread out, and the question is, finally, this will give a unique picture at the end. It will tell me exactly what it is. And the answer is no. There's something called the condition number of the matrix, which just tells you how you can invert, how accurately you convert it. And I flipped through that slide, and it won't be perfect. That's why we get slightly lower resolution. But that's definitely the case.
Can you use like?
Oh, let's give other. Let's give. Someone else. Yeah. What are the other applications of Fourier transformation in imaging? All right, a little lecture here on Fourier transforms. It's easiest to think about Fourier transforms in terms of sound. That a complicated sound like my voice is made up of lots of individual, when you thought of it as made up of lots of sine waves. Some low pitch, some medium pitch, some high pitch, all put together. And so that's the Fourier description of my voice. In the same way, you can take an image and break it up into different Fourier components. Big, broad regions of bright versus dark, bright, dark, bright, dark, bright, dark, and so forth. It turns out that processing certain types of functions are very easy to do in the Fourier domain. If you have the amplitudes of these curves, things like pattern matching. If you have an image and you want to check whether there's a picture of a hand-in. You can do this in the Fourier domain very, very effectively. It involves the multiplication by convolution. So there are lots of image processing, things like finding edges is very useful, is very easy in the Fourier domain. Telling where one object ends and the next object begins. Somebody else has any questions?
Professor,
Oh, there you go. Oh, go ahead.
First of all, I'd like to thank you for that amazing talk, and I have 4 questions. First, as you know that light has a mass. So how are those sensors capable of getting that information of elevation and of this very little size? Sensors, sir, as you have said that camera is very small, little than 1 millimeter, right? So how those sensors are capable of getting that information?
Your question is, how can something this small get the full information from the scene?
Yes.
Well, as Al Haithami understood, there's something called the pinhole camera principle, that even if you have a small hole, if you have a large wall, you can get a very good scene projected over that wall. So it's not the size of the aperture so much. It turns out there is something called the diffraction limit, that if you make this too small, then in the wave nature, you don't get the interference and you won't get a good image. So we're at about that, the smallest size. We wouldn't want to try to make something even smaller than ours.
يعني طبعا دكتور ديفيد has given a great talk. Actually, I had it in China before, and we would like to stay for 2 hours. But Rambus gave the instructions that it has to end now. I think we can continue the discussion for those who are interested. David, he has time for this. He has, and we can ask. بس بالعربي كده take something بالعربي هو عمل كاميرا، يعني الشركه دي عملت ريفوليوشن ثوره بالعرض في الكاميرات، كاميرا في حجم شعر الراس، بس المشكله ان الصوره بتطلع على الكاميرا دي مش شبه الصوره اللي احنا بنشوفها بيفهمها البني ادمين، يعني مثلا ممكن انا مصور في الكاميرا دي اطلع شبه الكعب، بس انا عارف ان يحكي لما بيصور في الكاميرا دي بيطلع شبه ايه؟ دي مش مهم بقى ان يعني هو كسر الحاجز النفسي ان الكاميرا لازم تاخد صوره البني ادم، ففي كونسبتس كتيره قوي وباتنس وفلوس كتيره في الموضوع ده، وده يعني هو موضوع كبير يعني في الارض ومعرفته.